Hello and welcome. I'm Sarah Waylett, and I am the creator and founder of Dreamgarten. And this is the Dreamgarten Path podcast. And it's really about featuring everyday stories about burnout from everyday people like you. So today, I have the pleasure of sharing Candace with you. And I would love to just actually hand it over to you to introduce yourself, tell us about yourself, and then we will dive right into our questions.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I am just honored to be here. I'm grateful to be able to connect with you, with the beautiful audience that you gather and the community that you've cultivated, and just to share a little bit more about my story. So as I mentioned, I'm Candace. I also call myself Candace the Dream Doula, and we will definitely share a little bit about the background behind that. But my work is really the intersection of my multi-passions, which are creativity, the creative arts, strategic thinking and business development, and wellness. I love the pursuit of just healthy living mentally, physically, and emotionally. And so I've created this lifestyle and a business that supports that lifestyle around being Candace the Dream Doula. I'm originally from Massachusetts. I've lived all over the world. I've lived in Nicaragua for a period of time, in San Diego, and I've recently returned back to Massachusetts. And I'm excited to share the story that kind of weaves all of the pathways of my existence together today.
I'm so excited to share the story with the world because I have had the pleasure of getting to know Candace, and all I can say is that you are just this huge bundle of joy, and it's such a pleasure to have your light in my life, and then being able to share your story further is just an honor. So let's dive right into the question. First things first, what three adjectives would you use to describe yourself?
Adjectives. Okay. I am enthusiastic. Actually, let me replace that one because I did my desire mapping exercise and I found one that was even zoomed out more. So effervescent was one of my words that I've just come to claim recently. I really love the combination of enthusiasm plus like a lightness in the world and creating this spark in the world. Another adjective would be vulnerable. I'm just so open-hearted. I think I've shared this with you and with our community before. Just wear my heart on my sleeve, and I totally honor that and love that about myself. And the last one would be creative, and I take that from the perspective of like fertility and being a creator in the world and being able to make something out of nothing. I love that we've been given this divine gift that we're able to do that with. And so I'm creative from not just the artistic standpoint, but from the like life-giving and creation perspective as well.
Yeah. And the vulnerability piece is so lovely. Candace said to me once in a session, "Here is my heart. Would you like to hold it?" And I have remembered that since then, just this idea of allowing people to hold your heart. It's such a special concept, and it is something that you certainly embody. Um, Tell me, how would you describe your life in 3 sentences?
3 sentences. Okay. I have never fit in. So instead of trying to squeeze myself into a hole that didn't fit me, I've created a world that reflects all of my uniqueness and the tiny details and complexities and intricacies of who I am.
Yes. Nothing more, just nothing more to say. Just yes, yes, yes. So now we move into burnout. So will you share with us the nature of your burnout experience? What did that look like for you?
Absolutely. So I've thought about this a good amount, and I've noticed that burnout is definitely cyclical. And it feels like it's an inheritance, like a cultural inheritance. And I'll just contextualize that by saying, like, as a Black woman in the United States, I think burnout feels like it's a part of our identity that's just been like superimposed culturally. And so I think for a while, I didn't even understand that burnout was something that actually isn't a part of who I am, because it was this cultural inheritance and because it's normalized in society to, push myself past my limits and to give my all to everybody around me and to put myself last on the list of priorities or last on the list of people to serve. That's cultural. And I learned that from my mother and her mother and her mother's mother and from my father's mother and my aunts, right, on both sides of my family. And so my burnout has definitely been a repetitive pattern that I call this my bullshit loop for myself and for my clients, but like my bullshit loop is just shrinking over time. So I'm healing it in that the cycle and the length of the cycle and the depth of the cycle is becoming minimized over time. But the way that burnout really presents itself to me is hyperachievement first. And so like giving every single ounce of what I have and then some, and really pouring from not only a space where of like my reserves, but then going into depletion and somehow mustering up superhuman strength to give more. And so that hyperachievement is the first layer of it. And then the kind of alarm clocks of my mental health really resound for me. I've navigated depression and anxiety since I was a young girl. And I didn't understand at the time, but in having used my own story to create like my personal empowerment rituals and the frameworks that I use for myself and my clients, I really come to understand that these like moments of anxiety, these moments of depression are really wake up calls and they're alarm clocks for my body and my being and my soul to say, hey, Candace, we need something here. We need your support. So mental health is usually the next thing that becomes a challenge after the hyperachievement. And then it's really just like dejection, having a difficult time connecting with others. And I love people. I'm like one of those rare humans that, 90% of the time, 99% of the time I love humans, and that 1% of the time I need like my alone time and to recharge. And I go deep really fast in that 1% of the time, but like genuinely I see the beauty and like the magic and the majesticness of humanity, and I love it. So when I get to a place where I don't want to connect, where I feel dejected and where I feel disengaged and like I don't want to contribute to the world and to others and the lives of others, that really is like a moment of severe burnout. And so I've experienced this a number of times as kind of a traditional corporate professional. I've had like my 9-to-5 route. I've experienced this as an entrepreneur and didn't know that I was experiencing it as an entrepreneur because I was kind of taking what I had learned and inherited and the ways that I found success in my corporate career and kind of mimic them in my business when I first started. And I've also experienced those as a creative artist. I've been dancing since I was 3 years old, and hyperachievement is just like baked into the world of artistry. And so like I found that the cycles of burnout in that industry as well. So I'm very well versed with burnout.
Yes. Yes. And of course I shake my head and say yes, because our experiences in some ways reflect each other's, right? And in the anxiety and the depression, in the cyclical nature, in things coming from a very young age, right? Seeing that, and that was the example. Tell me more about your perspective of your experience as a person of color. So you mentioned it just, in the beginning, but what else did that look like for you? Did you have trouble finding support that looked like you, right? How did your family respond? Anything else that you would like to share there?
Yeah, I think so two things I'll mention. I not only am a Black woman, but I was born to very young parents, one of which is not originally from the United States. So there was like a whole hybrid of challenges, just like on a societal or cultural level, around getting the support I needed, particularly around my mental health. I think because Black people in the United States, like we have the legacy of being cattle in this society, right? And I think as you're trying to strip the layers of that, or like the repercussions of that, and exist, that's a tall order. And so I look at my parents are just such incredible parents. I don't understand how they were 17 years old when I was born. I don't know how they managed to raise me, and just provide so much, and make me feel like a whole being and not just another statistic or a number. But there were limitations, right? They were young. One of them was an immigrant to the United States. They were Black, and odds were stacked against all of us. And so I think just having to come to terms with that, like those could be really insurmountable odds. And it does feel miraculous every day. And I think that's part of why I feel life is so magical and mystical, why I really have like a deep affinity for spirituality and connecting with the divine and embracing the divine energy that I believe flows through us all. Because it just doesn't make sense that I'm here. Just doesn't make sense that I have the life that I have, and that I've accomplished and experienced and become who I am. So that's one layer of it. I think another layer is that, like, as I look at the world of wellness in particular, and fitness, where I've kind of carved my path, and dance, like it's very white, right? Accessibility of like seeing myself, identifying culturally with the standards of these industries that I've become a part of, and really value. I just feel like, again, the oddball. And it took me a while to figure out that I didn't want to fit in. Like I because I'm a perfectionist and the hyperachiever, I wanted to fit in for a long time. I wanted to match these standards of what success has been defined as traditionally. And I realized that when I experienced them, when I reached the pinnacle of them, not embracing my identity, not embracing my culture, not embracing what I look like, who I am, what my family is like, actually contributed to the burnout that I was experiencing. And so, in efforts to be well, I started to create what I call like anti-status quo living, and really challenge what has been fed to me in the world, right? Wellness is not white. Wellness gets to be multicultural. Wellness gets to prioritize the well-being of Black people on their own terms as defined by them. And every other layer of person of color, which is like this weird monolith that somehow is supposed to define all of all of us, but doesn't, right? And I think it's just been helpful to give myself that permission to break that status quo and say, not only am I going to define and cultivate and personalize wellness for myself, and use tools and resources and community connections to build something that serves me, but I'm also going to teach other women, other Black individuals, other people of color as part of this monolith, to do that for themselves. And that's really the heart of my work.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. Um, just playing on that a little bit more and really going a bit deeper, did you ever experience any gaslighting when it came to discussing your experience as a Black woman, right? When it comes to your mental health, or when it comes to burnout, or when it comes to self-care, have you experienced those kinds of things as you've broken the mold and really made your own way in this space, both for burnout, but as well as wellness, especially for you, right? This would apply to sort of both of those situations, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting. It happens on so many levels, and the one that surprises me the most is how I like developed this self-gaslighting
Oh,
mechanism,
okay.
because I grew up I went to school in predominantly white settings from seventh grade through my undergraduate experience, and then went into a workforce that was largely white. Um, and so I think like I would gaslight myself if my narrative and my approach and my success wasn't lining up. I would tell myself it was my fault, and not the fault of the system or the structure that inhibited me from experiencing wellness and success. And so that was something I really had to unlearn. And I had to look at like where are the moments that you aren't even on your own team, Candace? And how can you critically, you know, give yourself constructive feedback on those moments and shift what you're telling yourself, right? Like I have this whole kind of catchphrase: there's nothing wrong with you. This self-improvement world is like chronically telling us there is something wrong with us. There's nothing wrong with you. Right?
That's right.
what if I could approach personal empowerment and expansion and transformation through the lens that there's nothing wrong with me, but that there's something that I can shift in the system, in the method, in the process, in the workflow, that can help me expand and evolve and shine as brightly as I desire to shine. That was transformative. So I always start there, because I didn't I didn't know this for a while, but like I was gaslighting myself throughout a lot of my life. But I think that obviously stems from other places, right? It stems from social conditioning within the Black community. If you're depressed, doesn't matter, get up and go anyway. You don't have time to be depressed. You don't have the space or time to cry. You need to go and present yourself in the way that your parents raised you to be, right? And that's a thread that's centuries old in my lineage. It came from being the all-star student in high school and middle school. I was in every club, I was in every musical, I played every sport, I was a student body president, my senior year. And I think in that, to be that, there's a persona that I had to embody. I was happy all the time. I was fun and expressive and bright and bold. And that didn't leave room for Candace who hated herself, Candace who didn't have the tools to support herself, Candace who had ideation that she didn't want to be here anymore. And to hold all that and to like have that in your belly, have that in your womb space, your creative space, that's really, really challenging to navigate. I don't know how I did it for a while there, because I didn't have support. I didn't feel like I could vocalize any of that stuff safely. I experimented with therapists who, this is like kind of creepy to describe, but it felt like I was this case study, this like person to explore and understand more, because I was so outwardly presenting okay. And so I was a person to analyze and be like, how is she like this? And I felt like a science experiment and not a human.
I think sometimes with therapy, we forget that they're humans too,
Mm-hmm.
right? We sort of put them on we put them on a pedestal because they have a long, list of letters behind their name.
Totally.
And sometimes we think that they know more about us than we do. But also, yeah, we forget that they have their own triggers, their own idiosyncrasies. And then really to your point about the just the gaslighting interest, it's really fascinating about the realization that you were not only, I'm sure it was happening to you, like I'm sure
Mm-hmm.
100%, but then that you were internalizing that to the point where you were telling yourself those things because that's what was being said to you. And so then you just repeated it, right?
Yep.
And then overcoming that
Yeah.
without the supports, systems and structures and privilege that others have when they're facing those things. Really, it's really incredible.
I think that's what's so beautiful about this approach that I've developed and adopted. It's so accessible, right? It uses my own lived experience as the textbook for how to overcome and how to navigate. And it's because I had limited resources and because I was navigating this internally, it's so creative. It's so fluid. It's so nimble and adaptable and flexible, because of the kind of context that it was created from. And I deeply value and cherish that. And that's why I'm like, I have to share this with as many people as I possibly can, because I just think it's so like this self-care craze has made well-being so inaccessible. And it's commodified it so much. And I'm like, no, like, yes, I love stuff. Don't get me wrong. I love stuff as much as the next person.
Get a candle and some oil and go in the bath and you're good. Call it good.
But the stuff has to be in service of you, right? And I think like it's so easy to fill the room with stuff and still not meet yourself. And that's what I'm
throw money at it.
Yeah.
Right. Yep. All this stuff. Yeah. And self-care also, I have to mention, right? Self-care often equates to anti-aging.
Correct.
For women, especially.
Correct.
Right. And all the money on all the lotions and all of the oils and all of the anti-cellulite. And this is all self-care. It's also so that you're skinny and pretty
and white.
Right. And white. Exactly. Right. And that's what you present to, and happy because you have done all of these things to yourself in the name of self-care. Yeah. So how did the impact, how did the impact of your lived experience, like you've talked about this a lot, as a woman of color, impact your acknowledgement of being burned out? And you said that it's a cycle. So maybe think about maybe the first time that you realized that this was the case for you. How did it affect your acknowledgement of that? Like your admission to yourself that you might actually be in that space?
I mean, the first time that I was able to acknowledge my burnout, I had experienced it at least 3 or 4 times, as if I go back and review the timeline. So that's an interesting question. But I think like I've been grappling a lot with the ways that I inhibit myself from healing. And I think the acknowledgement of burnout for the first time was me opening the window a crack to let the air of healing come in, right? It's like this home in the summertime, it's so hot because all of the windows are closed and you're just in there sweating. And you know why you're sweating, because all the windows are closed, right?
You're like, I'm not going to open a window.
I'm not going to open the window, right? Like literally just the acknowledgement and the affirmation of this is your truth was just like opening the crack of the window. And then that relief, I was like, oh, I want more air. I want more fresh, cool air. Let me open up this window and let me open up this window. Let me open the front door. Let me open, like at this point, I'm just now trying to open every possible doorway into healing, into self-acceptance, into self-affirmation as I possibly can. But I think as a Black woman, it can feel hard to give yourself permission to just say your truth. There's always a reason, a rationale for why your truth is your truth and how you could change it. And you go into problem solving mode right away, and you go through numbing right away, because we're not often afforded the space or the time or the resources to take care of ourselves. and to focus on our own self-preservation, right? Like there's one thing about nurturing and massaging and treating yourself like you're special, but Black women don't get to go there very often. It's literally like, how can you preserve yourself so that you can keep going and keep showing up for this person and keep being indispensable and keep being the exemplar Black woman, right? And so I think that first time that I acknowledged burnout, it gave me permission to start to break that mold a little bit more and to shift my focus on from my contribution to the world to what does my soul need in this lifetime? Like, what is my soul here for? And part of that is contribution, but part of that is learning to preserve and care for and nurture and help myself evolve.
Yeah. Were there resources available to support you? So you talked a little bit, but like, were you able to ever find a provider that didn't treat you like a science experiment, or at least a mentor or other folks that acted as support structures for you while you were beginning to heal?
Yeah, I definitely have. I have had therapists that I've loved. They're like my besties, which is wonderful. But I do think the primary source of empowerment has always come through dance. My like it was where I met myself for the first time. It was really where I could explore like the visceral connection to my emotions. I didn't understand why I was feeling them or what they were, but I felt that deep intimacy with my emotions through this movement expression, and I was also good at it, so I gravitated toward doing it more because I was like still feeding that hyperachiever and perfectionist. So it was like a double-edged sword, right? Like I was able to deepen my passion for it because it connected to where I was. And I tell this to people all the time, like you can't erase where you are. If you're a perfectionist and a hyperachiever, own that. I now get to proudly call myself a recovering perfectionist, right? Like I don't claim that title anymore. But like if that's where you are, be where you are. And so that carved my path toward a passion for dance. But the second door was self-intimacy, was self-expression, was mentorship. I met a number of Black women performers and choreographers. The choreographer that like really accelerated my career was a Black queer man, or is a Black queer man. And so having these oddballs, these people who have similar life stories, life challenges, and not necessarily having them speak, prescriptions of wisdom to me, but being able to observe how they've created success and wellness and peace and beauty in their own lives. I'm like analytical, so I'm taking all this data in and I'm like, okay, how can I use that to inform how I want to lead my own life?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so glad that you found them.
Me too.
Yeah. Did you take time off when you realized? Did you take time off a traditional work job, right? Like, if you did, to what extent? What did that look like for you?
So I'm actually in that kind of phase right now. Like I forced myself into rest and ease, and even when I forced myself, I had some significant kind of family shifts and challenges that arose that were like, okay, no, you didn't take off enough. Like you need to really stop. So that was beautiful. I'm in a season of that now. And I didn't realize like I have had compounded burnout. So the fact that I didn't kind of unplug enough in the last cycles has brought up a lot more for me to the surface to kind of navigate, which I'm grateful for, right? Like I'm happy that I have this space and this time and this freedom that I've cultivated through launching a entrepreneurial endeavor. You don't really get to do that in the same way when you work in a corporate setting, unless you have like this unicorn of a company, which I'm looking for, right? I'm looking for those opportunities. but
That's right.
they can be harder to come by.
Yeah.
And so I'm grateful that I do have entrepreneurship to support there. And then I think the last kind of cycle before that, I really restarted my life. I moved to San Diego, really had never been there, had no idea what it would be like to live there. And on a whim, I said, I'm doing this. It's in my soul. It keeps calling me. It's tempting. It feels like it's going to evoke some kind of transformation. And it did. I completely designed a life around my emotional, physical, and mental well-being. And it still had its challenges. It wasn't, easy as 1, 2, 3, but let me tell you, joy, pleasure, and delight were constant in my years living there. So didn't take a break necessarily, still had that hyperachiever going in the background.
Not going.
But the kind of paradigm shift and looking at life from a whole different vantage point really served my sense of wellness. And then, life still served me what I needed to get out of hyperachiever mode. It just came a little bit later.
That's right. So tell me more about measures you took to sort of heal yourself. I mean, moving is a big one, right? Like something was calling you and you followed that voice and you said, yeah, I'm going to take a chance and, move to San Diego. What else did you do to help yourself heal?
I really embraced my intuition. So part of that was that, like the traditional medical, like Western medical approach wasn't comprehensive enough for me. And so I hired a naturopathic doctor that I worked with for a year, and she literally healed pain or helped me heal pain that I had been navigating since I was a little girl. Like just none in my body. And that blew my mind through like herbs and and craniosacral therapy and like micro shift of my skull on my spine. It blew my mind. I also really tapped into just like exploring my inner world more through tarot and through journaling and through coloring and getting a little woo-woo and like more prayer and more movement. And so those used to be like part of my regiment and like disciplining myself. And I shifted that to be, okay, what would it look like if I use those as like an entryway to my existence? And I said, let's start these as, daily routines, daily rituals that I can use to tap into myself, rather than when I'm having a shitty day, I'm reactive, and saying, go talk to the tarot because it's going to tell you exactly what's going on in your world, or like go look at the astrological transits now that they've occurred and be like, oh yeah, that's why that was happening. So it was a shift of more proactive engagement with myself and with my well-being rather than reactive.
I love that. I love that so much. And I also identify with that very much. So we get along so well. So you didn't have necessarily a traditional return to work either, but what changed for you?
Oh, okay, what changed besides everything?
That's what I'm saying. Tell us.
I think it's
everything.
really beautiful. Like I'm in the phase where I'm like ushering myself into a new return to work. And so it's like, truthfully, I'm grappling with, do I close the business I started to like let that chapter be gone and reintroduce myself now that I have like decolonized, deconditioned, like deprogrammed a lot of these things that I had been collecting and holding as the only one right way to run a business. So that's something that I literally have on the table for myself right now. And it actually feels like really aligned with me, which is scary. I'm like, I don't want to kill my baby. Right? Like, I don't want to throw my baby out in the bathwater, but it does feel like it's resonating. So I'm processing that. And then got honest with myself. I love entrepreneurship. I love the freedom and flexibility that it provides, but solopreneurship is not something I'm necessarily interested in. And so I want to have a more traditional corporate role so that I can feel like I'm part of community, that I can feel like I'm contributing to a large mission. And that wasn't something that I was admitting to myself before. I think like most entrepreneurs, they're running from their toxic corporate jobs. And I shouldn't say most, many entrepreneurs are running from toxic corporate jobs. And because of that, there's this relationship that you can never go back to the corporate world. And so my reemergence is, no, I'm not going to go back into a toxic setting intentionally, but I'm going to actively try to design a career in a traditional space where I'm employed by someone in alignment with the way that I will design my business. So it's just about like iterating as you go and allowing your soul's evolution to match the opportunities you're calling in.
Oh my gosh, I love that for you so much, so much. And I resonate with that. Do you have an ongoing strategy to prevent burnout? What does that look like? What does that look like for you?
It's a 3-part process. And again, it's cyclical. The first is like deep self-intimacy. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, there's that phrase, know yourself like the back of your hand. And I think every time I say that phrase to myself, I look at the back of my hand and I notice a different thing every time, right? Mm-hmm. And I notice like how tiny the little pores are and the little lines and little wrinkles are. And like, it's such a beautiful representation of how much you can learn about yourself every single time you go back and look at you. And you look at you in the inner world and outer world and mental world and spiritual world and emotional world, right? There's just so much intricacy in our existence. And so few of us are taking the time to connect with ourselves. And so self-intimacy work, self-exploration work is constant for me. I'm always like, what's going on in your world, Candace? How you doing today?
Great.
What's up? And it's hard, right? It's like sometimes I get out my journal and I ask that question, I'm like, I have no idea. And so I start moving and use movement to like pull the emotions out of my body. And I use tarot to give myself an artistic kind of template to respond to and to explore my mind through that lens. So I integrate a lot of tools in that self-exploration work as well. And then the second kind of phase of that is building strategy based on what I discover about myself. So again, like using my lived experience to design my approach and my method and my way of living. I think so many of us are taking in strategies from other people, and that's beautiful. I love being being human and being interconnected by nature. I think that's so powerful. But you then have to go with a fine-tooth comb and say, okay, now how does a strategy mold to me and what I know about myself, what I know about my truth? How can I use the strategy to affirm who I am rather than repress, erase, diminish who I am? So that's kind of the second phase of it. And then 3 is just run wild. I have this framework that's go, grow, and glow. You have to get in motion. When you ideate, go do some things and grow through those things. Don't be afraid to mess up and fail and iterate and glow. When we're in motion, when we're growing in real time, when we're evolving in real time, it creates this effervescent light, right? It makes people look at us. It literally illuminates the night sky. And so I have that be part of my mission to say, like, yes, take bold action. Yes, fuck up as much as you possibly can. But also know that in those moments where you're going and you're bounding forward and sharing who you are with the world, you are also glowing. And more people are going to be focused on that glow than they are of your grow. Your grow is actually going to like humanize you and make people feel like they can relate to you and showcase your vulnerability and cultivate connection with other people. So that's the framework. I'm just like cycling through nonstop.
Love it. I love it so much. I wrote it all down. Took my notes. So I think I know what you're going to say, but I have to ask this question because it's my standard question.
Ooh.
Is burnout something that happens to us or something we do to ourselves?
You know, it's interesting, right? Like I think it's both, but I want to choose one. So I'm going to say, and this may not be what you thought I was going to say. I'm going to say it's something that happens to us.
Okay.
I think that we can't deny there's inherent structures within our society. And these structures value hyperachievement, value whiteness, value productivity, value money making, right? Like they dictate through the de facto structure how we go through life. And so in a way, burnout does happen to us. We can then perpetuate it, right? Like we can then
we can
catalyze it
with the best of them.
And so I think it's something that we can't throw our hands up and say I have no responsibility in this. But you know, it's like a rain shower that does happen to us, but you don't have to sit in the rain forever if you don't want to, right?
Yeah. All right. Last few questions that are my favorite.
Woo-hoo.
Best burnout resource you would hand to anyone in need right now?
This is so hard. Can I give two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
The first one, literally put on a song and just dance. Like the ability to allow your body to teach you what your soul needs. That blows my mind, and it's free. And I love it because you know, I think dance has a certain way that it's perceived, and it's a very ableist way that it's perceived, but dance is really universal. And like you can dance by just thinking about how you would want your body to move. And that's going to allow your body to communicate the wisdom it needs for your soul's well-being. So that's the first one, because that's universally accessible. I love it so much. And then the second one is like very tactical, but there's a woman named Erin Claire Jones, and she has an awesome resource that's called the Human Design Blueprint. And so it's similar to astrology in that it's based on where the stars were in the sky when you were born and when you entered this world. But it is a 60+ page book that is all about you. And the way that it frames our essence, the way that it shares ways that we can like deepen who we are and our connection to who we are, deepen our expression of who we are, start to trust ourselves more and lead lives that are in alignment with our nature, I think are really impactful and very tactical. So I'm always about how can we get into action, right? Yeah. How can we get in motion as quickly as possible? And I think that resource does a beautiful job of framing that.
When we post this, I'll make sure that I include the link to her website as well. That would be great. All right. Your song, it's in your previous answer of just dancing. We're going to provide the playlist. What is your song for the Dreamgarten Burnout playlist? I'm so curious.
Signed, sealed, delivered by Stevie Wonder.
I love it.
That's it. Over and over again. Just like talk
Over
about
and
sheer
over.
delight.
I'm so excited. I think that one needs to go on a different playlist that I have too. That's
Awesome.
lovely. I'm like, immediately it starts playing in my head and I can
Mhm.
hear it. Oh, so good. All right, Candace, tell everyone where they can find you and the work that you do in the world.
Awesome. To keep this so easy for everyone, I want you to remember one thing only, if nothing else, Candace, the dreamdoula.com. That's where you can find all the ways you can connect with me via my email list, my social media profile, and learn more about me in general. So Candace, thedreamdoula.com. And a great way to remember my name, if you forgot it, because we've been here for a while. I'm Candace Taylor, and I call myself Candace, the Dream Doula. And, I want to invite folks to just connect with me in a really intentional way. I know when I first started this like self-empowerment and soul care journey, I, hyperachiever and the perfectionist in me, wanted to fix everything at once. Right. I'm like, my life has to have to shine like the heavens immediately.
Right now.
And right now, fix it. Like, I don't want a single blemish. And it's interesting. Like, I think as ambitious folk, as multi-passionate folk, like we probably do have the capacity to make major shifts in our lives at one time and improve in a significant way at once. But what I found is that it's not the best for your nervous system to do that kind of stuff, to do that kind of transformation. It makes it really hard to maintain. And so you end up frustrated, overwhelmed, in pain, tired, depleted all over again when that was the thing that you were trying to heal. So I created a quiz based on this framework that kind of like helps us to zero in and prioritize what's the area of greatest opportunity in our lives, to light up our lives and to create transformation. And it's called the Light Up My Life quiz. It's a free resource. And so it gives you an opportunity to do a self-assessment, scan where is the area in my life for greatest growth. What can I learn about myself? I'm all about self-intimacy and learning. So it gives you the opportunity to do that. And then I give you the opportunity to get a customized ritual guide from me based on your area of opportunity. And for this podcast, I'm going to give everyone the opportunity for a free custom ritual guide. Those are usually $47, but if you're listening and you stayed tuned to this whole thing, we're going to make it free for you. So if you type in the promo code Dreamgarten, it's going to make that free. So you fill out that quiz, and then I'm going to send you a customized ritual guide that will help you just tap into improving, expanding, and evolving in a way that's going to prioritize your mental, emotional, and physical well-being.
Oh my gosh, I love that so much. That is such a beautiful gift. And we will make sure that the link to the quiz and the promo code is posted everywhere this podcast is shared, so that you can have the exact code and the link to access that amazing gift from Candace. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It was such an honor to hold space and have this conversation. It's such an important conversation to share and make sure that people know that they're not alone when they're going through their burnout journeys, and that they can achieve well-being again. And that it's a process, right? It's a journey, and that there are those of us that are absolutely ready and willing to help in any way that we can. So thank you, Candace, so much.
Thank you,
So
Sarah.
appreciate your time.
I adore you. You're the best.
All right, sending love, and we'll be back next time. Thank you so much. Bye.